Thank you for watching, liking, commenting, sharing, and subscribing right now. In another video today, we talked about why more bloggers aren't writing about Linux, and then we turned around and blogged about why more bloggers aren't writing about Linux, and then we wrote another Linux article. And really, it's less of an article and more of a story, because that's what we're trying to do on Locker Gnome, not just post the latest tech articles, but really tell some tech tales and share stories. This story is why Linux can't sell on the desktop. Oh, this is not to invite a flame war or any kind of troll bait, because the person who wrote this is a Linux user, but he's considering straying from the flock. If you love Linux and you want to keep Harold as a part of your crowd, you got to convince him to stick with Linux. He's hard-pressed to come up with a reason why he would use Linux today. And he's used every operating system like a lot of geeks have, not just Linux, but OS 10. He remembers the old classic OS from Macintosh back before OS 10. I know it's kind of hard to remember. He uses Windows as well. But Linux was always his go-to operating system. When he was talking about it and evangelizing Linux to the group of Gnomies in TeamSpeak, Stacy Ferris, who's probably, and I don't know if he's here in the chat today, one of our most, how should I say this, supportive Gnomies. Stacy installed Linux for the first time in a decade and asked, well, why should I be using Linux over OS 10 or Windows? He didn't see the reason. He didn't see the value. And that caused Harold to wonder, why is he using Linux? So, he's given you a pretty good tale on why Linux can't, quote-unquote, sell on the desktop. And the bottom line is, Windows is good enough. And OS 10 is taking the place of Windows when Windows isn't good enough. Unless, of course, you're a diehard zealot and you don't want to be tied to any kind of commercial properties whatsoever. Linux is the way to go. Unfortunately, you're only caring about 1.2 of web traffic right now. There are different variations of Linux that certainly can gain adoption. Android, for example, it's a great example of how Linux can succeed in the marketplace, but it's mobile. It's not a desktop. Ubuntu's good, and there are other great distributions as well, but there's almost too many choices. Consumers don't like choices. They like to be told what's best. And if something's not commercially supported, it's going to be a tremendous challenge for it to get to take off, even if it costs nothing or next to nothing. Some people are willing to pay for the experience. And of course, you can get mad at me. You can get mad at this author. I wouldn't get mad at this author. This author is one of you. The person who's telling the story is a Linux supporter, but he's challenging his own convictions. He's wondering why he should continue with Linux if everything else is, quote-unquote, good enough. So I'm not inviting trolls. I'm hopefully inviting some cogent conversation. Let's try to keep this civil, and I'm sure it won't be. It's not about which operating system is best. Best and better is relative. It's really outlining the reasons and telling the tale of why Linux hasn't sold on the desktop to this point and why it probably never will. Take a look at the link in the description. It will allow you to digest on a much more deeper level, and I understand this is TLDR, or the Locker Gnome Daily Report. Too long, didn't read. But sometimes you may actually want to read, because you might learn something.